invest it. Don't put it in single digit ROI. You should look to double, triple, and quadruple ROI. And if you get good at that game, then you can hang out with me or subscribe to my YouTube channel where I teach you how to master the game of infinite ROI, which means literally creating money out of thin air. It means you don't need anything to create a whole bunch of money. And that is probably my favorite game because it means that you're creating so much value in the world that you don't even need money to make money.
So Chris, are you of the persuasion that everyone, even if you've got a good job, that everyone should have some sort of side hustle?
I think one of the biggest financial mistakes that we don't understand is that we are habituated to believe that it is okay to earn all of our income in a single source. Mm-hmm. And that's a problem. If you don't have money coming in from at least 5 different sources, then you should be proactively saving money and investing it into things that produce alternative sources of income. If you don't have multiple streams of income, I mean, let's face it, 30 years ago, you could get by with a single source of income. Since then, you need at least 2 sources of income. Now people are stretched and needing 3. Guess where we're going to be in 20 years? If you don't have 5 or 6 sources of income, that means that you're literally going to have Americans with 3 jobs. And they're going to work just to sustain all of this thing that we have called life. And I'm just saying, man, get ahead of the curve. Best thing you can do is save your money and get it invested or learn how to borrow other people's money, OPM, put that to work. Bottom line, do what wealthy people do. Copy the wealthy and then become wealthy. Now you got to be smart, you got to be intelligent, you got to have a good mentor, you got to make sure that you're avoiding the traditional pitfalls and trial and error. But right now, you get a stimulus check in the mail, don't consume it.
Chris, I think this is the year for people to be really, really smart. And if this stimulus money comes through, people should do the right thing with it. I agree with you 100%. Don't consume it. Put it into something that works. If you are interested in some side hustles, we honestly have dozens of really amazing side hustles that can be another source of income for you immediately. Real estate takes time. These side hustles can start generating income how quickly, Chris?
Literally days. It's measured in days. And for anyone that's listening to this, all of my books on what these side hustles are and how to get them, all of my books on real estate, how to invest, all about winning the game of money. Right now, because of the pandemic, I'm making all of that available for free. So if you just go to chriskrohn.com, you just got to spell it right with the double K, KRISKROHN. If you go to chriskrohn.com, I've got all of my free resources there because right now you need to get yourself educated and then don't hesitate once you've educated to implement because execution is everything, like my mentor Tony Robbins says. And right now it is time to execute.
This is the Bigger Pockets Podcast, show 327. It's time to burr.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio.
Spectacularly ignorant of math or purposely trying to scam you. While this may not be what you wanted to hear, it does simplify the problem of choosing a major or discipline. It makes it one of simple mathematics. Which degrees or majors pay the most? And the answer is simple. STEM. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, and includes degrees like engineering, chemistry, computer science, medicine, etc. They are no doubt the most difficult degrees, some of which take 5 years to earn instead of 4, but they are the ones that are going to increase your wage and command a higher salary. The reason they command a higher salary is simple. STEM graduates create the stuff people want in society. Compare 2 degrees, English and electrical engineering. What precisely does the English major provide that the rest of society wants? We already speak, read, and write English in this country, most people being fluent and literate by the age of 5. We don't read books by English majors, because ironically most English majors never get published, let alone write anything good. And no kid in the history of kids ever listed English lessons on their Christmas wish list. But compare that to the electrical engineer. Society is helplessly dependent on the constant and reliable generation and transmission of electricity, so much so, without it, society would collapse in about 3 days. We all want more fuel-efficient cars, solar power, wind power, batteries, etc. And there isn't one kid, let alone adult, who doesn't have some kind of electrical doodadery on their Christmas wish list. In short, it boils down to the basic economic laws of supply and demand. Everybody demands a service of electrical engineers. Nobody demands a service of English majors. There is a short supply of electrical engineers because of the difficulty and rigor of their discipline, There is a glut of English majors because it's easy and anybody can major in it. This difference between the relative supply and demand for different majors manifests itself in the form of starting salaries. Starting salaries are nothing more than the numerical economic reality of the labor market. And if you look at the starting salaries between electrical engineering majors and English majors, you see electrical engineering majors are more valuable. A difference of $25,000 a year. $60,000 versus $35,000. Of course, most English majors will take umbrage and insist they are just as important as electrical engineering majors. And yes, poetry majors will take offense and insist they are just as valuable as chemistry majors. The problem is, they're not. They factually and numerically are not, because society, through the labor market, mathematically tells us so by placing a higher value in the form of higher starting salaries. People willingly forfeit over $500 for Apple's latest electrical gadgetry. People willingly pay anything for the latest touchscreen device. But few, if any people, pay for English lessons in an English-speaking country. This doesn't mean English majors are evil or that poetry majors are dumb. It just means nobody wants to hire them. And that is something neither you nor they can afford after dropping $70,000 on an education. Naturally, not everybody can become an electrical engineer or a computer scientist. People just don't have the aptitude or interest. The trick is to find something you like, have an aptitude for, and pays well. This requires a fair amount of soul-searching, trial and error, researching the labor market, and sample studying different fields. And truth be told, it takes most people years to find out what they're good at and what their true calling is. The key thing, however, is not so much choosing the right major, as much as it is avoiding the wrong one that can financially cripple you. To this end, I recommend the following bits of advice in addition to merely looking at starting salaries. Avoid the liberal arts and humanities in general. Though many people will disagree, the humanities, aka the liberal arts, are largely worthless degrees. They do not teach you any skills society wants or the economy demands. Worse still, most liberal arts departments have become corrupted by politics and no longer serve as genuine institutions of learning as much as they are tools of indoctrination and the Democratic Party. Can it be replaced by the library? That being said, the liberal arts are very interesting. Just because a degree in the humanities doesn't pay doesn't mean you shouldn't read up on philosophy or history. But, since it doesn't pay, why pay $3,000 per class to some washed-up professor to teach you about Plato when you can go to the local library or the internet and read Plato for free? You get the exact same education, probably better, with the exact same employment prospects, sans the student loans. Is the primary source of employment merely reteaching? Speaking of washed-up professors, what do people in those fields do for employment when they reach the master's or PhD level? Are they hired by NASA? Do they go and work at the R&D labs of Merck? Are they developing new surgical techniques at the Mayo Clinic? Or do they just go back to the same classroom and reteach the stuff they were taught 3 years previous to new students? The telltale sign of a worthless degree is when the only or primary application of the study is to merely reteach the same stuff to new and future students. This tells you the study has no practical application outside academia, and therefore technically has no value. Does it end in studies? Most, but not all, worthless majors end in studies. Engineering implies its purpose and value. Metallurgy does the same. And if you ask me what I was majoring in and I just said African American or transgender, you would be confused. If I added studies to each, then it might make a little bit more sense. The truth is, if it ends in studies, or has a hyphen in it, you are not studying anything that will teach you a skill or an employable trade. You are merely paying $250 per credit to study the traits of a group of people. It might be interesting, but will do nothing to increase your wage. Repeat classes. Understand, because worthless degrees offer nothing of value, it is hard to extrapolate a full 4, 6, or 8-year degree out of those majors, let alone multiple classes. For example, everything about education could be summarized in a 50-page booklet. But to get a doctorate in education, you have to read thousands of pages which merely regurgitate the same thing 100 different ways. Because of this, classes and their material tend to repeat themselves, offering you nothing new to learn and making it nearly impossible to read their textbooks. Made-up language / pablum. This is from the University of California's Women's Studies Department's webpage. The Department of Gender and Women's Studies offers interdisciplinary perspectives on the formation of gender and its intersections with other relations of power, such as sexuality, race, class, nationality, religion, and age. Questions are addressed within the context of a transnational world and from perspectives as diverse as history, sociology, literary and cultural studies, post-colonial theory, science, new technology, and art. Did you understand any of that? Because neither did I. What do you suppose the chances are it's a worthwhile degree? Finally, I strongly recommend every high school student and college student read my book, Worthless. Not because it is going to enrich me, but the book fleshes out in more detail the key topics we are covering here and serves as a great guide towards choosing the right major. Besides, it's $12 on paperback and $5 on Kindle, both of which are significantly less than the $75,000 you'll be asked to spend on a degree. Choosing a college. If you were to listen to your teachers and parents, you would think you only have two options after graduating high school. Either go to college, or don't. The truth is you have many more options, which is a good thing because not every young person fits into this black and white, college or not dichotomy. However, where your parents are right is you can't just graduate from high school and hope to make a decent living. You do need to develop some kind of employable skill, otherwise you will forever be that stock boy. And choosing the right type of college is the first step in developing that skill. Public university. Public university, or what I like to refer to as regular old college. These are state universities subsidized by your state government so they are made affordable to the majority of people. Every state in the country has at least one campus, the vast majority of them having multiple campuses for your convenience. Ergo, why you have University of California, Davis and the University of California, Los Angeles, etc. As long as you are a resident of the state, you qualify for in-state tuition, which is cheaper than what they charge out-of-state residents. For the most part, these colleges are merely average in the quality of education they provide. Some unique campuses have better reputations for specific fields. For example, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign is a highly ranked tech school, while the University of Michigan Ann Arbor is one of the top-tier law schools in the country. But by and large, companies and employers don't come banging down the doors to hire graduates from these schools. That being said, what you major in will be the primary determinant of whether you find a job after graduating from one of these schools. Private universities. Private colleges are precisely that. Private schools that are not part of the state system. In being so, tuition is much higher since they do not have the state subsidizing their tuition. In theory, because they are private and because you are paying more, they are presumably better schools than the public ones. However, the truth is their quality and caliber varies greatly. There is no limit to the small, tucked-away private liberal arts colleges nestled within the hills of the East Coast that charge an arm and a leg for tuition only to dump their graduates into the unemployment line. If you're going to attend a private university, then you want one that is either highly ranked or considered part of the Ivy League. The Ivy League. Schools in the Ivy League are considered the country's top schools. Your Harvards, your Yales, your Princetons. Students who get into these schools are practically guaranteed to be financially successful. Because of this, they are incredibly hard to get into, requiring you to have a near-perfect GPA, top-notch ACT and SAT scores, an exemplary student resume, tons of extracurricular activities, and so forth. But while acceptance into these schools will likely result in a six-figure salary, there are just two major drawbacks to attending these schools. One, you pretty much have to give up your childhood to get into them. Kids that get into these schools are the ones whose parents force them to take violin lessons at 3 and never have any free time to do their own thing. If you haven't been pulling a 4.0 grade point average, performing a piano concerto at the age of 12, and have a marginal SAT score, then you're unlikely to be accepted. But thankfully, you at least had your childhood. 2, these schools are considered the best, not because they're actually the best, but because they provide students with the best connections, nepotism, and networking. In reality, a Harvard graduate is no better or smarter than a University of Ohio graduate, it's just that he went to Harvard while the other guy went to Ohio. This means your success will not rely on studying and excelling in your passion as much as it will your ability to schmooze, kiss ass, and brown nose. Tech Schools Community College. Despite the focus and emphasis on attending a 4-year school, not everybody is cut out for college. This doesn't mean you're less intelligent, it just means you don't have the personality for it. There are many people who don't have the patience to sit in a classroom listening to some boring professor blather on about the Battle of Waterloo. They are more hands-on. They are more practical. They want to get to work. For these types of people, tech school or community college, or VOTech, may be their best bet. Unlike four-year colleges, tech schools teach a specific skill or a trade such as welding, plumbing, computer networking, etc. Thankfully, most of these programs only take 2 years to complete, and graduates have better employment prospects than most people graduating from a real college today. Sadly, however, in the past and even today, tech school was advised against, even ridiculed by most teachers and counselors. Students were pushed into attending four-year colleges while dismayed from specializing in the trades. However, the labor market has proven them wrong. Plumbers make a commendable wage of $20 an hour, while your average Master's in Women's Studies graduates making $7 an hour pouring coffee. The other benefit to attending a community college or tech school is that you can get your prerequisite classes in before transferring to a traditional four-year college. The primary benefit of this is that tuition is often much cheaper, parking is most likely free, and the professors are more down to earth. Military. While many people are familiar with the military in terms of the GI Bill, most people do not know that the military has a ton of training programs, schools, and classes you can take within itself, most of which will either transfer to an actual degree or some kind of certification. Of course, you wouldn't join the military solely for its educational benefits, but if you are considering joining the military, it is helpful to know that there are educational opportunities within. Self-study and certification. There are several industries that are receptive to hiring somebody not on the basis of whether you sat in a classroom for 4 years, but whether you can prove you are capable of a certain skill or trade. A perfect example of this is the computer industry. Millions of people are employed as computer networkers, computer technicians, repairmen, etc. Not because they went to college, but because they passed their Cisco certification, their A+ certification, or their Microsoft certification. There are other industries that do this, but the point is, why go to school when all you need is to pass a test and get certified? Of course, this requires the discipline to force yourself to self-study, but the time and cost savings alone make such a non-traditional education a viable option. Additionally, there is an added benefit to the self-study certification education model. It is likely to gain popularity in the future. With the internet, more and more classes are being offered online for free. MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses, Khan's Academy, edX, are all examples of an increasing number of classes that allow people to teach themselves the skills necessary to land a job, get a certification, or start a whole new career. Of course, such classes may not be viewed as legitimate by most employers today, but in the future, as it becomes apparent the internet can educate just as effectively as colleges can, and at a fraction of the cost, more and more employers are likely to consider people who are self-taught and self-certified. Degree mills. Previously, I indicated just merely graduating from high school was not enough, that you had to do anything beyond high school in order to be successful. The truth is, I was wrong. There is something much worse than just graduating from high school. You could attend a degree mill. Degree mill is a derogatory, but well-deserved term for unaccredited schools. Understand, every real college, university, trade school, or community college needs to be certified by one of 6 regional accreditation boards in the United States. If they aren't, then they are considered an unaccredited school and their credits cannot be transferred to other schools. You have likely seen advertisements for these schools during daytime TV. They usually offer degrees that, in 16 short months, can lead to an exciting career in, you name it. Law enforcement, medical transcriptioning, travel and hospitality, veterinary science, etc. But the 2 dead giveaways that they are scams is if they offer a culinary program or their classrooms are in a strip mall versus a genuine college campus. These schools are scams. They are bottom-feeder schools that prey off the worst students who perform so poorly in high school they could not get accepted anywhere else. With nowhere else to go, these students gladly pay an exorbitant price for tuition, only to be given a degree that is invalid and not recognized by other colleges, let alone most employers. Ensure you never attend one of these schools by going to Wikipedia and looking up List of Unaccredited Institutions of Higher Learning. Financing an education. The only thing more difficult than passing your classes in college is how you're going to pay for them. Tuition is climbing at 3 times the rate of inflation. Between classes and studying, you already effectively have a 50 to 60 hour per week job, prohibiting you from working. And given the economy, it is unlikely you'll be starting off making $60,000 a year with bennies and plenty of excess cash to pay down those student loans. However, while you may not be able to pay cash for your education, you can do some basic things that will at least keep your student loans manageable upon graduation. Work. Though it may suck, I strongly recommend working while in college. I don't want to hear any complaints. I worked an average of 42 hours per week and attended school full time. Of course, I dropped 30 pounds, was sleep deprived, and would get sick for months at a time because of malnutrition, but it technically was possible to pay for college. That being said, I would never recommend working full-time while attending college, but at least aim to work 10, preferably 20 hours per week. This will go a long way in at least paying for your living expenses while in college, perhaps even making a little dent in your tuition bill as well. Work smart. If I told you I also graduated 6 months early with a 3.96 GPA while working 42 hours per week, would you still believe me? Well, it is true. I graduated 5th in my class in 3.5 years, all while working full-time. However, there was a trick. I worked as a campus cop. While a lot of my shifts involved patrolling campus or walking girls to class at night, if you gained enough seniority, you were promoted to building shifts. These shifts were highly coveted because you would make 1 or 2 patrols an hour, but for the remaining 90% of the shift, you would sit at a desk and study. This was ideal because I could now kill 3 birds with 1 stone. I was able to earn some money, I was able to study, and because I was alone and uninterrupted for so long, I was forced to study, thereby boosting my GPA. Contrast that with working as a waiter or a janitor. You don't have the benefit of studying while you work. To this end, I strongly recommend finding a job where you can study on the job. Matter of fact, unless you're particularly desperate for money, I suggest refusing a college job unless you can study. It just isn't worth it otherwise. Scholarships. The irony of scholarships is that they are primarily for high school students with high GPAs, because once you enter college, you probably won't have the time to apply for them. Between classes, studying, and work, you won't have time to write an essay of 500 words or less on why you think work ethic is important to society. Especially when there are 127 other applicants doing the same. It's almost a guarantee you'll make more money working the hours you would have spent applying for said scholarships. So if you're in high school and have a decent GPA, by all means go for it, but if not, your time is better spent working. Live with your parents. Tuition has become so expensive and the job market for young people so bad, there is no longer any shame in living with your parents. Yes, it may suck, and yes, you may lose a little bit of freedom. But if you can attend college near your parents and cut rent from your budget, that alone will go a long way in reducing your total student debt come graduation. A room. Some people will live in dorms. Some people will live in a studio. Some will go so far as to split a 1-bedroom. I recommend just finding a room. While the majority of housing on campus will be dorms and apartments, you should be able to find a house where the landlord rents out by the room. You then share the kitchen, the bathroom, etc. with 3 to 6 other guys paying around $200 a month. Quarters are cramped and rarely do things get clean, but you're not going to college to have fancy living quarters, you just need a place to sleep. The military. Unless you are dead set against it, joining the military has a lot of benefits. Namely, they pay for everything. Food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, and education. Admittedly, there are risks to joining the military, and it isn't for everyone, but there are a lot worse ways to pay for your education. Take your time. The truth is, there aren't any jobs out there for young people today. This could of course change, but the current unemployment rate for young people, 20 to 24, is 13%, and the underemployment rate is closer to 50% depending on which measure you use. I.e., there won't be a high-paying, challenging job for you upon graduation. Therefore, there's no rush. You can enjoy college. Leisurely take a class here or there, play hacky sack with some peers outside, work during the daytime as a bartender, play some video games at night. Not only is this more enjoyable, the costs of college are spread out to the point you could very likely pay cash for them, never having to take on student loans. It is okay to take on some debt. The problem a lot of people have is they worry or fret about borrowing money regardless of what it's used for. This makes sense if you borrowed $250,000 to buy a Ferrari but only make $40,000 a year. But as a college student making a paltry $10,000 a year, it can be quite intimidating borrowing $20,000, even for something as legitimate as college. The key is to know the difference between an investment and a hobby. A degree in computer science is an investment. A degree in communications is a hobby. One is going to pay off, the other isn't. As long as you are applying the funds towards a wise degree, it's perfectly alright to borrow some money. Find a sugar mama. By all means, if you possibly can, find yourself a sugar mama. While divorce has wreaked havoc on the country, the silver lining is that it has made available millions of 30 and 40-something women who are desperate to be convinced they are still young, still beautiful, and still capable of attracting a young man. Again, like applying for scholarships, I would not dedicate too much time towards it, but it might be worth poking your head into the local cougar bar to see if you can't get an older woman to finance a couple months' rent and groceries. A miscellany of advice. Grad school. After graduating with a bachelor's or undergrad, you will of course have the option to continue on and get your master's or doctorate. Barring becoming a doctor, it usually isn't worth it. Most advanced degrees in the liberal arts only serve to get you a low-paying teaching position that does not warrant the $150,000 in tuition and 8 years of college. Most advanced degrees in STEM are unnecessary, as you are immediately employable with just a bachelor's. And nearly all advanced degrees in business or law are worthless, as there is a flood of MBAs and lawyers. This isn't to say grad school isn't worth it, but whether you should pursue an advanced degree will become more apparent once you graduate and spend some time in your field. Internships. When you go to college, time will be scarce. You'll have to attend class, you'll have to study, and you'll probably have to work. What little time you have left will be incredibly valuable. Do not waste it interning. While the idea of internships may seem appealing, the truth is the vast majority of them are nothing more than a scam companies use to get cheap or outright free labor. Worse, the work is never challenging. It's usually mundane clerical work like filing, faxing, and other simple tasks that you could literally have done in the 4th grade. In short, they're nothing more than abuse, and you should avoid them. There are, however, incredibly rare instances of internships that are legitimate. You get paid, you get to do real work related to your degree, and they increase your chances of employment. Unfortunately, you'll spend more time finding that magical internship than what it may be worth. Therefore, if you insist on interning, be incredibly picky and quick to judge. If you show up for work and they have you file, you walk out. No excuse, no reason, you walk. If you show up for work and they say, "Sorry, we don't have the budget to pay you, but it's worth the experience," you walk out. No excuse, no reason, you walk. Hopefully you find that one internship, but your time is more often than not better spent drinking and chasing girls. School location. Unless you are a particularly independent-minded individual, where you go to college will likely determine where you end up living during your 20s and 30s. And unless you really have your heart set on a particular program at a particular school, I suggest looking at other ancillary traits to determine where you would like to go to college, as location will have a huge effect on your happiness. For example, climate. There is no godly reason to go to school in the upper Midwest. Winters are harsh, you get to deal with snow emergencies, and just see how much fun it is driving on black ice. Instead, I would strongly recommend relegating your search for schools in Texas, Florida, Arizona, California, Georgia, etc. Another example, landscape. Were I to do it again, I would have attended Black Hills State University in Spearfish, South Dakota. The reason why? Because I love mountain climbing, hiking, and fossil hunting. Whatever your hobbies and passions are, why not attend a college where those passions and hobbies are in your backyard and not 2,000 miles away? Finally, welfare. You are likely to be at your poorest during college. Why not avail yourself of the generosity of the country's most liberal and leftist states? California, Oregon, New York, etc. Even if you're paying out-of-state tuition, the bevy of government handouts may more than offset those costs. Of course, once you graduate and start making money, you would look to leave the state immediately, but at least while you're poor, let them pay for you. The difference between a university and a college. I mention this only because nobody told me, but universities are different than colleges, and this can cause confusion for college-bound men in high school. A college is a school that offers degrees in a certain field. For example, the Columbia School of Journalism or the Carleton School of Management are individual colleges. They are not universities. A university, on the other hand, is nothing more than a campus full of different colleges. When you apply to school, you apply to the individual college you wish to attend. This will depend on which major you wish to declare, but if you ever decide to change your major, and that major is in a different college, you will likely have to reapply. The reason this is important is because different colleges have different application standards. The College of Liberal Arts at the University of Minnesota, for example, has the following requirements of their applicants. 1. Must have a pulse. 2. Must be human. 3. Must have a positive high school GPA. 4. Must be stupid enough to apply there. The Institute of Technology at the University of Minnesota requires you 1. Have a 3.0 GPA. 2. Have decent ACT and SAT scores. 3. Demonstrate some kind of aptitude for STEM. Ergo, if you want to major in a certain field, understand the college that offers that degree may have higher application standards than the rest of the university. This means you have to either work hard in high school or, if already graduated from high school, apply to a lesser college at the university, usually their liberal arts college, boost your GPA there, and then reapply to the original college of your choice. Underemployment. Even if you major in a legitimate field, graduate with honors, and do everything right, do not get too excited about your employment prospects. The reason is that you can have the greatest resume in the world, but without jobs at the other end, all that education and training is moot. Sadly, this is the current state of the US economy today. Economic growth is half of what it used to be, which means demand for jobs has also been halved. Taxes and regulations have also grown considerably, resulting in companies and employers going overseas instead. And generations before you have failed to save up enough money for retirement, forcing them to work longer, thus leaving less room for promotion and opportunity for younger generations. In the end, you must approach your education as what it was always intended to be, an investment. But you must also be keenly aware that with $1 trillion a year being spent on the industry, it attracts some of the most manipulative, charlatanistic scum. This results in a world that isn't what it seems, as teachers, professors, principals, counselors, and deans all claim they're there to help you, but in reality, they are there to take your money. Navigate this world carefully, ensuring you get an education that is going to pay off. You simply cannot afford otherwise. Chapter 5. Career. Upon graduating, you will have invested a significant amount of time into your education and training. On the low end, if you just went to trade school, you will have been going to school for 15 years. On the high end, if you decide to pursue a doctorate, you will have spent a total of 21 years in school. These will respectively represent 75% and 81% of your total life on this planet upon graduation. You would think with such an enormous amount of education and training, a human would be nearly capable of anything. You can learn to brew a beer in a couple of hours. It only takes a couple of weeks to learn to weld. And it only took 140 hours to train World War II fighter pilots. So what does the real world of work have in store for you? Nothing that will ever come close to your total potential. The sad truth about the labor market is that the opportunities come nowhere near to what you are capable of or what you trained for. Unless you are in a highly specialized skill, say brain surgery, you can expect at most to be using about 20% of your total capacity. Additionally, since you are younger, you will not be taken seriously nor given the opportunities to prove yourself. Worse still, while you languish in this environment, your skills and what you learned during college will start to atrophy, as will your creativity and innovation. In the end, most of the jobs you will have before you're 30 could be done by a competent 5th grader and will rarely be rewarding, challenging, or well paid. The reason for such a difference between your capabilities and what is out there for jobs is multifold. First, there just isn't the economic